So tell me about the title. How did you come up with Brigit's Woven World? I just think it's amazing. I think it's a great looking book, and maybe you could hold it up so we can see it.
This is the book. Oh, can you see it?
It's fantastic, and
this is my. I don't know if you can see this. Oh, the wrong way. This is a scarf that was woven in Ireland, and Brigit's. Well, she's associated with weaving because one of the most important legends about her is about her cloak that expanded to cover all of the county of Kildare.
oh, that's right, because they said she could have a certain plot of land. And she said, well, I only want what my cloak will cover.
That's right. So I thought about a bigger kind of weaving of all of life. That Brigit was supposed to be a patron of also childbirth, so she took an interest in small human creatures, but also small animal creatures. And you know, she loved food, and she loved music, and she loved beer, and kindness, and hospitality, and poetry. So I thought about the way that she wove things together. You know, there's a line in this poem that she softened blood fury, and there are stories of Brigit making peace between rivals, between enemies, and you know, and there's a thing in the poem about hunger, and she blunted the thread of hunger with a gleaming thread of satisfaction, because she was known for giving away food. Like, before she left her father's house, according to the stories, she was constantly getting in trouble for getting, you know, like they'd go into the dairy and all the milk was gone because she'd given it away, and she was always just like, oh, you need that? Here, giving it to people. So she just has this lovely, loving way about her, and that seems to me to connect to everything, all of life. So that's where the title came from.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So then how did you go about writing and or choosing which poems got to be in this wonderful book of yours?
Thank you. Well, the poems grew over many years of living in Ireland and traveling to Ireland and learning Irish, and so they grew very organically. But when it came time to choose them, I have written more poems about Ireland, or you know, from my experiences, but I wanted them to sort of sing to me. You know, I wanted each thing in the book to be, I don't know, just kind of radiant on its own terms, and to feel that they spoke somehow together as well. So I left many things out of the book that I just didn't think sort of belonged, and that's that just a plain old green light, you know, of does it fit, does it not fit? And I've often thought with any writing that you know when it needs to be revised or when it's not quite right, because I've always said there's a sort of sense that there's a bruise under the skin of the apple. It's something you can't quite see, but you can, it's there, a texture, and something there makes you wince. Something there goes, no, it's just not right. And you know it, and you have to be honest with yourself about that. At the same time, you have to be open enough to say, you know, is this one that a few words might change that and the bruise would go away, or is this the whole thing is bruised, you know? And you can't do it too quickly. And I think actually revising and choosing and discriminating in your own work is a fine art all unto itself, and one that I'm still learning as I go through other books of poems right now, and I look back at what I previously had thought all fit together, and I now go, I don't know, you know.
Just in lists of ideas of what you thought might fit together, or books that you've actually had published?
No, books that I'm trying to put together, two in particular, and the one, Sit Down, Mr. Wolf, that I thought I had put together perfectly well, and now I look back and think, no, there's some poems in there that I just don't think belong, and I think they want to be reconfigured.
Well, this wonderful book's been out about a year now, right?
Well, I think about 6 months actually.
Only 6 months.
Yeah, I think it came in June.
And
I
you-
started working on it about a year ago.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And so how do you think it's hanging together 6 months later?
I really am proud of it, actually. I
Oh,
really
good.
like it. I feel like all the little puzzle pieces fit together. It makes me happy. And it was a new thing to write commentary on the poems. I felt almost on some level that I was like disobeying some great poetry rule that I've always known and believed that poems should stand on their own 2 feet or their
Right.
own multiple feet depending on the poem. But I just felt that the poems, when I read them in public, I know that people can receive them without fear somehow if there's a little preamble. And all of the old kind of baggage people carry around about poetry and stuff, that I just didn't want there to be that. I wanted my family and my friends to be able to read my poems and say, "Oh, I get it. Yeah. Oh, that was a help." Or, "Right, now I see where she was coming from." And so I put a lot of love and care into writing the commentaries.
Beautiful. Now, which
Thanks.
one was the first one picked for this book? Or can you read us and invite us in through one of your commentaries and then read the poem? Or how would you, do you recommend people do that first? Read the commentary first? And
I think either way, if a person is drawn to read the commentary, I'm thrilled. I think probably, well, one of probably the first poem in this book that I ever wrote was the poem called Cables, which is about Irish knitting. And I wrote it when I first came home from my first trip to Ireland. And I had, my first Irish knit sweater. And I was so interested in the idea of the way that women had encoded messages and signs into their knitting. That this art form was almost like a protective spell, and it was a signal and a sign that other people could read. That this man belongs to this family. He belongs to us. And I imagined the women as doing something just as heroic and magical as the men when they go out to sea. And I wrote that poem, I think, when I was a senior in college.
wow.
And it stood. It stood for me. It seemed strong. So it belonged. Probably the Brigit has come to herself, the saint, the goddess, this symbol or whatever, the friend, I'll say, she has come to be so important to me over the years. But those poems about Brigit and Patrick, which begin the book, are later creations than some of the other ones in here.
When did you first hear Brigit?
Well, I mean, when I went to graduate school, Moira Herbert from University College Cork came over, and we had a whole class with her on hagiography, and we also had a class with her on early Irish literature, women's presence in early Irish literature. So I heard about her through that, and I had read, the Latin life of Brigit and the Irish life of Brigit through those kinds of things. But then later, it wasn't until I went on my postdoctoral year in Derry, and I was invited to take part in a celebration of Brigit in Belfast that year. And I saw women of all stripes from all over Ireland come together under Mary Condren, who's this amazing theologian in Dublin, organized this event, and they invited me to come and to share music at this event. And it changed my life, that event. It was a whole weekend, but there were nuns, there were pagans, there were Jewish people, there were, you name it, anything, Catholics, of course, and Protestants, everybody. But what really united them was this interest and appreciation of Brigit.
Wow.
And again, that sense of weaving and bringing things together, and the goodness and the love
And creativity.
And creativity, for sure. And actually what we did that weekend was so creative. I mean, we wove crosses out of rushes. We all made ourselves special cloaks, actually. And on Sunday morning, we stood in these beautiful cloaks. Because I was being very poety, the early Irish poets wore cloaks made of birds' feathers. And I sewed feathers on my cloak so that
Do you
I
still
could.
have it?
I do, yeah.
Wow.
I do.
How
Yeah.
come? I haven't seen it.
I'll have to get it out.
What was the rest of the cloak made out of?
Actually, I bought this beautiful, like a blue-green shimmering silk. It's unbelievable. And, I mean, my cloak is it's very flashy. But it was really interesting to see all these women standing there in a big circle in their cloaks. The way that they felt express themselves. And
Did they feel that Brigit had dressed in cloaks?
well, I mean, Brigit's cloak is what grew, and
Yeah, so
yeah,
if she covered the land, she must have worn one too.
I'd say, yeah. Yeah.
So you have one queued up, you want to...
Well, I'll read that first, probably the earliest poem in the book, which is called Cables. And so it's as I said, about the knitting tradition. From the wool card in the kitchen, they ravel him out to sea, in a jumper of bluest black, colour of mussel shells and rain squalls. This is sharing. All humble roads pull both ways, taut intersections of morning's outspin and evening's wind in. The knitters treat the wool with oil, to slap off spray's ice hands. They insist on an even trade. The light hours he frays in the curragh, nodding air to sea to air, nets and fish. At supper time he lopes uphill to the young woman, her chowder, a child, a talk under the quilt. She is learning to knit his family name without letters. Crossed ropes, honeycombs, smoke phantoms on stone walls, a tree on each sleeve. His mother sits in the cane chair and counts out stitches with her every afternoon until a coarse skin appears in the shape of her man, practically waterproof and unmistakably his. She invokes the yarn against cold, storm, and anonymous drowning. Even after years, a body comes home, drifts into the bay with a face as featureless as kelp. They drag him off the beach and can still discover his name in the salty tangle. He is Nora's man, they say, and she claims him, pointing to the sign for seabirds, 3 on each shoulder. They bury him under a stone in the churchyard. At the hearth she was taught of the intricate and endless pattern, the women's diligent needles tying strand to strand, and the sea remorselessly tugging the loose end of the skein.
Wow.
As I read that too, I think of my own mother, who's a knitter, and growing up, you know, we used to wind the yarn. You know, she'd say, put your arms out, and you were just sort of there to have your hands out, you know, and skeins of yarn. Thinking of my mother.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that one going to have a description, that your commentary as well?
Oh, it does. But really just what I told you, just I said, as many people know, the knitters of those beautiful Irish knit sweaters encoded them with wishes, hopes, blessings, and hints to family identity, while most jumpers, and that's what they call them in Ireland, were made of unscoured white wool. I imagined my young fisherman wearing a gansey of bluish black, painstakingly knit for him by his wife, whose love tugged him home even as the sea tugged him away. And I think the reason I pictured him in a gansey of bluish black is because my mother made me a gansey of bluish black. And it is a color of mussel shells and rain squalls.
Nice.
And I still have it.
Well, I just think this is a beautiful collection of poems. And not only are you a brilliant poet and storyteller and performer, musician,
Goodness.
vocalist, pianist, harpist, flautist,
Acrobatist. No.
But you've recently been working with Fox Harper Inc. Publications. Is this a book that can be gotten from that website?
It certainly can.
Can you give us that website address or an email of some sorts that someone can get a hold of you to get this book? Where can they buy it? Is it online somewhere?
They could buy it at katechadbourne.com.
Awesome.
Yeah. And there's a little PayPal thingy there and
a way to get in touch with
a
you.
way to get in touch with me.
Order it right there.
Yes.
Fabulous. That's
Oh,
fantastic.
thank
Could
you.
you hold it up for us again? That was just
Yeah.
really great.
Can you see it? I want to hold it up in a way that you can see the...
Oh, I see. It's reflecting the...
Yeah. They are okay.
Very nice. Very nice. Brigit's Woven World and Other Poems of Ireland by Kate Chadbourne.
So, yeah, thank you. There's... Patrick makes a appearance in here as well. And the puca, who is the great mischievous spirit who takes all different forms of a goat and a dog and a black horse and just basically likes to scare the tar out of people just for fun. And there's a poem about learning Irish in there, and there's a poem about my own, what I call my apprenticeship of going year after year to the same town in Donegal and just giving my whole heart, like you're just a set of ears trying to take it all in, and you're trying to sort of imbibe this language through your skin, and it changes you a lot, actually, doing that work. I'd say in the poem, I call that my rugged double, this double of me that is there taking shape as another Kate thins, grows less as that rugged double grows more as I apprentice myself to
the language.
To the language. And but I said to a mood, to a fiddle tune, to all of it, just which I think when you're learning a language is necessary, to take in as much of it as you can and as many facets of it as you can, or what I should say, that's what's native to me. So to think about songs, to think about poems, to think about stories, that's what's native to me, but to someone else it might be another kind of apprenticeship. But I'm sure it's as total and as wholehearted as anybody learning a language, really loving a language. It would have to be.
What can you say for us in Irish?
Well, tá súla go winni sibh sult as an leorsha. I hope that you enjoy this book.
And what about to our Irish-speaking friends? Maybe you have a few things you can say to them.
Well, what would we say to your Irish-speaking friends? Banach tí lá le Brigit. Happy St. Brigid's Day.
That's coming up, isn't it?
That's coming up.
And any other type of proverbs or blessings you'd like to add to these Irish-speaking friends?
Well, my favourite blessing is always sláinte and Fradaine agah to all of you. So may you have the health of the salmon.
The salmon.
Not by eating it, but just by being it.
By being a salmon?
Yeah, well, the salmon is, there's another long story, but
Tell us.
The salmon is the longest, or mythologically the longest living of the creatures of Ireland, and it's the one that knows all the secrets. And
Not the Loch Ness Monster.
That's a Scottish. That's a Scottish salmon.
Oh, excuse.
No worries. But yeah, it eats the hazelnuts of knowledge.
This salmon does?
The salmon, yeah.
Not the chestnuts of Italy.
No, it doesn't. It's the salmon of knowledge, the Bradan Fassa. And of course, eventually certain people like Finn McCool eat the salmon of knowledge and they in turn gain the knowledge. But we'll say that the health of the salmon I'm wishing for everyone is the uneaten salmon.
So what does that blessing sound like?
Sláinte and Fradaine agah. Yeah, may you all have, or I should say, sláinte and Fradaine agat to you. May you have the health of the salmon.
I will.
I hope so.
Thank you so much.
Go to Mila Maya. Thanks a million.
Get me a mile, get to myself, yourself. Get me a mic. My who?
Oh.